Question from the media. Greetings to the Russian President, Vladimir Putin, and President Pezeshkian. Given that we are also discussing the major treaty signed today, I would like to ask both honorable presidents a question. We all recognize that Iran and Russia share deep-rooted cultural and social perspectives. We are two major powers in this region with significant opportunities. Both our nations oppose a unipolar world and advocate for a new global order based on multipolarity. We are actively engaged in key international structures, such as the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, SCO, the Eurasian Economic Union, EAEU, and BRICS. Despite these shared perspectives, we observe that our bilateral relations, especially in trade and economic cooperation, do not yet match the strength of our political partnership. My question is, what are the future prospects for our relations in light of today's treaty? What can we expect going forward? What developments will this treaty bring in the future? Thank you very much. Strengthening the legal and regulatory framework undoubtedly creates better conditions for addressing all aspects of our bilateral cooperation. One of the most crucial areas for us is trade and economic collaboration. The President and I have already discussed this matter both in closed and expanded meetings. We have analyzed how Russia's relations are developing with some of our neighboring countries that have significantly smaller economies and populations than Iran. In many cases, despite these limitations, our trade turnover with them is substantially higher. With a country as large as Iran, home to 85 million people, it is clear that our current level of trade and economic cooperation does not fully align with our true potential. This is precisely why the treaty signed today is so important. Its purpose is to create additional foundational conditions for expanding trade and economic ties. To put it simply, we need less bureaucracy and more concrete action. That is why we gathered today, to resolve financial issues, accelerate decision-making in logistics, address customs regulations, and advance cooperation in the energy sector. The President has already mentioned Iran's growing engagement with the Eurasian Economic Union, EAEU, and I also emphasized this point. Taken together, these efforts create an excellent foundation for us to take bold, decisive steps forward. We have strong projects in all the areas I have just mentioned. I am highly confident that through joint efforts, especially with the active role of our Intergovernmental Commission, we will continue making progress. I have no doubt about this. No matter what obstacles or challenges external forces may try to impose on us, we are fully capable of overcoming them and moving forward. I am certain that this is exactly what will happen. Thank you very much for your question.
Regarding the prospects of our cooperation in light of the major treaty we have signed today. From the very first days of my presidential campaign, I have emphasized that the primary objective of my government is to strengthen our cooperation with neighboring countries and expand opportunities for further collaboration. Naturally, I am referring to the Russian Federation, a great nation with which we have established very strong political relations. Russia holds tremendous significance for us, both in the region and globally. In order to reinforce our bilateral relations across all sectors without exception, the first step we needed to take was to assess our existing relations and establish a new contractual foundation for further development. What can we do moving forward? It is imperative to develop a new mechanism and modernize our treaty, precisely what my esteemed colleague, the President of Russia, has spoken about. This applies to investment projects, industrial cooperation, scientific research, and educational programs. We have outstanding projects, as well as highly effective commissions, subcommittees, and working groups. All of them have now reached a consensus. Moving forward, these subgroups and working teams will establish a new treaty framework, allowing us to expand our activities across all sectors based on the principles set forth in this agreement. This, of course, aligns with our shared policy objectives to ensure regional security and to counter the unipolar world order. Furthermore, we are firmly convinced that in our region, we can cooperate independently, without the interference of external players. We have large and influential neighbors with great potential, and we can confidently state that we do not need to take guidance from overseas powers. I am truly honored to be here today, and I believe that the future holds great prospects for our cooperation. Interfax Agency. Good afternoon. I have a question for both presidents. We have been discussing key projects, and I am particularly interested in the progress of two major initiatives. A year ago, both countries announced plans for the construction of a gas pipeline from Russia to Iran to supply Russian gas to the Iranian market. Was this project discussed during today's negotiations? What progress has been made in implementing these plans, and what are the estimated supply volumes? The second project is the well-known North-South International Transport Corridor. How successfully is it developing? Are there any challenges hindering its further expansion? Challenges always exist, whether for this project, the second one, or any other major initiative. There are always issues that require A. Coordination, B. Consideration of the economic, logistical, transport, or energy conditions at any given time. There are many questions involved, including price agreements, and different parties approach these discussions from different perspectives. This depends on various factors. My colleague, Mr. Miller, is sitting next to you, and he can explain all the technical aspects related to the calorific value of oil and gas and other industry-specific considerations. These are technical details, and they are being actively negotiated. That said, the pipeline project is in progress, and both projects are highly important and promising. If we talk about potential gas supply volumes, we believe that the project should start with small-scale deliveries, around 2 billion cubic meters, and eventually ramp up to 55 billion cubic meters of gas per year for Iran. There are also other potential areas of cooperation in the oil sector, and we have a major ongoing nuclear energy project. One nuclear power unit is already operational and functioning successfully, and we are now discussing the construction of additional units. Yes, the timeline has slightly shifted due to financial and payment-related adjustments, but there are no secrets about this. Nevertheless, work is progressing. It is moving forward. Thousands of people are already working on these projects, and currently, about 80% of the construction work is being carried out by local companies. This is a large-scale, serious initiative, and progress is being made. Of course, there are always issues that require our attention, but that is precisely why we hold these meetings, to resolve them efficiently. As for the North-South International Transport Corridor, we are fully committed to its development. This project offers additional opportunities for expanding trade, not only for Russia and Iran, but also for other nations engaged in active economic cooperation with us. There are technical, administrative, financial, and organizational challenges, but they are being addressed. We have established a special office dedicated to this project, and Deputy Prime Minister Savelyev is personally overseeing it. He regularly visits Iran, meets with Iranian partners, and ensures steady progress. These projects are in motion, and we firmly believe that they will be successfully implemented. Regarding gas cooperation, I would like to expand on this point by drawing an analogy. Just as the human body relies on its blood vessels to supply energy to different parts, we too need similar arteries, reliable transport routes to deliver energy and materials to where they are needed. We discussed the importance of supply routes for materials, energy, and trade goods. we must actively work on strengthening these logistical structures. In order to achieve our shared vision and goals, we need to modernize and enhance our fuel and energy transportation routes. This is an issue that our experts have been working on for a long time. We are fully prepared to upgrade and restore the infrastructure needed for these energy supply routes. We also discussed gas, electricity, other energy carriers, and even renewable energy. Our teams of experts on both sides are actively working on these issues. We are fully confident that we can achieve these objectives and that we must remove any obstacles that could hinder our progress. Our goal is to ensure that these supply routes are fully operational and function at maximum efficiency. Of course, there are technical challenges, but major strides have already been made. I can confidently say that through these efforts, we are once again opening a new chapter in Russia-Iran energy cooperation. And with each passing day, it becomes increasingly important for us to strengthen our capacity to manage these processes effectively.
سوال بنده این بود که با توجه به روابط خوب ایران و روسیه.
С учетом хороших отношений Ирана и России, а также сегодняшний договор, который был подписан.
Given the strong relations between Iran and Russia, as well as the treaty signed today, what will be the policy of both countries regarding the international agenda and regional cooperation, particularly in our region? How can all of this be implemented in practice? For a long time, we have been coordinating our efforts on the international stage. This applies to the most pressing issues on the global agenda, including the Middle East and the South Caucasus, which directly impact our interests. The President also mentioned the conflict in Ukraine. Our Iranian colleagues are well aware of the situation, and we continuously keep them informed. Overall, we are guided by the principle of international law, which is based on the United Nations Charter. All international relations must be built on these principles, ensuring respect for the interests of all parties and non-interference in the internal affairs of sovereign states. These are fundamental principles that we strictly adhere to. The treaty signed today establishes an additional, substantial, and serious framework for strengthening trust-based relations in full alignment with the principles I just outlined. This treaty defines our shared priorities and commitment to upholding them. It serves as a foundation for strengthening our bilateral ties in the interests of both the Iranian people and the Russian Federation. I believe that the treaty we signed today, especially in terms of our regional cooperation, will contribute to stability and peace in our region. Through dialogue and consultations, while respecting territorial integrity and avoiding the involvement of external forces in our region, we, the regional countries, are fully capable of resolving our own issues. I believe that if the same level of dialogue we had today were held with other countries, we could significantly reduce tensions and eliminate unnecessary border conflicts. Some countries artificially create obstacles along borders, which of course presents a major challenge. Our policy is based on mutual interests. We believe in fostering positive relations with regional actors and in our ability to resolve disputes without external interference, especially when it comes to the Middle East.
Спасибо большое. Завершительный вопрос. Будьте любезны, пожалуйста, известие Синеок Виктор. Спасибо.
I have a question for both leaders. It is now evident to everyone that the old world order has come to an end. The world is transitioning to a multipolar model, but this transition is far from smooth. How, in such constant geopolitical turbulence, particularly in the Middle East, can we maintain a balance of power? As I have already said, the foundation for achieving this balance is the United Nations Charter. We must strive to follow it and not manipulate international law for narrow self-serving interests, bending the rules to benefit a single nation or group of countries. We cannot replace the UN Charter with so-called rules that, as I have said countless times, no one has ever seen or agreed upon. The key is to return to the principles upon which the United Nations was founded, and to strictly adhere to the principles outlined in its charter. Of course, this is a complex process. I would like to remind you that during the Soviet era, our foreign minister, Andrei Gromyko, was often called Mr. No because of how difficult it was back then to reach agreements, particularly during the Cold War. However, that was precisely why the United Nations was created, to serve as a platform for finding mutually acceptable solutions, rather than allowing one country or group of countries to impose their unilateral decisions. At some point, certain actors began to believe they could make all decisions unilaterally, even subjugating the United Nations itself. And when the UN did not conform to their demands, they simply declared it irrelevant. But whenever they needed it, they conveniently returned to its principles. We must go back to the fundamental purpose of the UN, that all nations, large and small, are equal. Every country has equal rights, and we must respect that. As my dear colleague, President Putin, has pointed out, double standards have reached the end of their era. It is unacceptable that one country is allowed to kill civilians, children, and women, destroy hospitals and schools, and then claim to be an advocate for human rights, while at the same time dictating human rights norms to others. They impose their own version of human rights on us, while blatantly violating these very principles themselves. These double standards are something we categorically reject. Look at what is happening in Lebanon, Syria, and Gaza. The bloodshed is unending. You have all witnessed it with your own eyes. Even international organizations have failed to ensure the safety of women and children. How can we talk about human rights when these atrocities continue unchecked? No one was ever supposed to destroy hospitals, schools, and vital infrastructure. But we see this happening right in front of us in the Middle East. These double standards are unacceptable. Regrettably, this situation persists. I believe that today's agreements, especially those with other nations committed to international law, are a step toward ending unipolar dominance. We cannot allow a world in which double standards dictate global affairs. There is no difference between small and large nations. As my friend has said, all countries are equal. If we truly want to respect human rights, they must be respected universally, not just for certain countries or specific groups. Today's meeting and the agreements reached between Iran and Russia represent another step toward building a multipolar world. And of course, this is especially important for the development of both Iran and Russia. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Завершаем пресс-конференцию. Благодарим глав государств, делегации и представителей СМИ. Спасибо.